The fleet drifted at the edge of the solar system, a cluster of broken ships held together by stubborn hope. Their hulls were scarred with burns from old battles. Gashes along their sides showed where armor had once been torn away. Some ships no longer had power and floated like lifeless shells, pulled forward only by the slow momentum of years. The stars gave no comfort, and silence filled the dark corridors inside. On board these ships lived the exiles. They were not soldiers. They were not rebels. They were simply people who had been cast out by their own empire. To their rulers, they were unwanted mouths, burdens on resources, and reminders of past mistakes. So the empire had gathered them, loaded them into failing ships, and sent them drifting toward nowhere. The exiles had survived longer than anyone expected. They patched leaking walls with scraps of metal. They shared food in measured portions, always a little less than they wanted. Children grew up without seeing a world beneath their feet. Elders whispered old songs to keep their memories alive. But the days stretched endlessly, and each passing year drained their strength. When the fleet entered the solar system, most believed it was the end. Their ships were failing. Water systems had broken. Engines coughed and stopped. They thought the humans of Earth would see them as every other world had seen them. A danger, a burden, an invasion of starving strangers. The exiles whispered among themselves that Earth would raise weapons and end their suffering quickly. Yet hope, however faint, refused to die. Some spoke of the stories they had heard in the long silence. Tales of Earth, a world that had never bowed to the Empire. A world of stubborn people who built homes in deserts and cities on oceans. A world that had once fought enemies far stronger than itself and endured. On one ship, an elder named Darren stood by a cracked window and looked at the distant sun. His hands shook from hunger, but his eyes still carried a spark of life. "The humans will not welcome us," he told the others around him. "But perhaps they will listen. If they listen, maybe we will have a chance." The younger ones did not share his faith. A mother named Lena clutched her child and shook her head. "They will fear us. They will see only our broken ships and think we are invaders. Why would they care for us when even our own people cast us away?" Her words carried the bitterness of truth. For too long they had been turned aside. Other worlds had chased them away with gunfire or silence. No one wanted to feed the unwanted. No one wanted to carry the weight of strangers. Still, the fleet drifted closer. The blue glow of Earth began to shine through the windows of the ships. Oceans reflected the sunlight like shields of silver. Green continents spread like promises of life. For those who had lived too long inside metal walls, the sight was almost painful. Children pressed their faces to the glass, whispering questions. Was the air fresh? Would the ground be soft beneath their feet? Would the humans allow them even a single step on that soil? The questions had no answers, but the wonder in their voices softened the hearts of the weary adults. In the command chamber of the largest ship, leaders gathered. They were not trained officers, only men and women who had stepped forward when others would not. A dim map showed Earth and the silent human satellites that circled it. No one spoke for a long time. The choice ahead was heavy. At last, Darren's voice filled the chamber. "We cannot turn back. We have nowhere else to go. We will send a signal not as enemies, not as beggars, but as people. If Earth refuses us, then we will accept our fate. But if they listen, if they show mercy, then perhaps this long journey will have meaning." The others agreed, though fear weighed on their faces. Together they crafted a simple message in the human language, a plea carried on broken transmitters. The words held no demands. They only asked for shelter, for water, for a place where children might live without fear. The signal left the ship in a weak beam of light, crossing the space between the exiles and Earth. Every heart waited in silence for an answer. Minutes stretched like hours. Each passing second deepened their dread. Then, through static, a voice replied, calm, clear, and steady. It spoke not with anger, not with fear, but with welcome. The humans of Earth had heard them. The humans of Earth would not turn them away without listening. In that moment, the fleet stirred with a fragile hope. Perhaps Earth was different. Perhaps this blue world would not cast them aside. Perhaps here at the end of despair there would be a beginning. The signal from Earth was short, but to the exiles it was brighter than sunlight. It carried no threats, no commands to leave, no harsh warnings. It carried only an invitation. The humans of Earth asked them to stay where they were and promised to send help. On the largest ship, people gathered in the common hall. The air was thin, the lights dim, but their eyes shone with something they had not felt in years. It was hope. Children asked if food was coming. Parents tried to keep their excitement quiet, afraid it would be crushed by disappointment. Yet even the most cautious among them could not stop their hearts from beating faster. Hours later, the first human craft appeared. Small and swift, they came not with weapons raised but with beacons of light guiding their path. They circled the broken ships like shepherds around lost animals. The humans spoke again through the transmitters, their voices steady and calm. "Follow us. We will lead you to safety." The words seemed impossible. Safety had been a dream, never reality. But the exiles obeyed. Their ships were barely holding together, their engines weak. They followed the human craft slowly, like tired travelers leaning on a strong arm. When the planet grew larger in the windows, the people gasped. Clouds swirled white against the blue seas. Green land spread wide, rich and alive. They had lived too long among metal and shadows, and the sight of Earth filled their hearts with longing. Children reached toward the glass as if they could touch the oceans. Even the elders felt tears rising in their eyes. Soon the crippled fleet was guided toward the orbit of the moon. There, human stations waited. The stations glowed with energy, alive with voices and movement. Docking arms stretched out, welcoming the first of the exile ships. The moment the clamps connected, cheers echoed inside the broken hulls. For the first time in years, they were no longer drifting without direction. The first to step into human stations were not soldiers or leaders, but medics. They carried supplies, water, and food. They wore no armor, only light suits and gentle expressions. They moved carefully, not rushing, but showing no fear. They handed water to the weakest, food to the children, and blankets to those shivering in the cold. A little boy from the exiles, thin as a shadow, stared at the piece of bread in his hands. He had never seen food given so freely. He took a small bite, then looked up at the medic. The medic only smiled and nodded, encouraging him to eat more. Tears rolled down the boy's face as he ate, and his mother covered her mouth to keep from sobbing aloud. Not all trusted what they saw. Some of the exiles stepped back, suspicious. They whispered to each other that this kindness could not be real. Surely the humans wanted something in return. Surely this was a trick. They had been betrayed too many times to believe so quickly. But the humans asked for nothing. They did not demand service. They did not speak of debt. They only repeated the same promise. "You are safe here." In the command chamber, Darren spoke with the human officers. The translators worked slowly, but the message was clear. The humans wanted to move the exiles to a safer place on Earth's surface. Their ships were too weak to survive much longer in space. Earth offered land, hospitals, and fresh air. Darren listened carefully, his hands folded to hide their trembling. "Why do you do this?" he asked. "Others turned us away, others saw us as waste. Why not you?" The human officer, a woman with calm eyes, answered simply, "Because you asked for help. That is enough." Her words were plain, but they struck Darren like thunder. No empire had ever spoken that way. No ruler had ever given aid without a price. Yet here were humans, standing before them with open hands. Soon groups of exiles were guided onto shuttles. The journey down to Earth was short, but for them it felt like crossing into a dream. As the shuttles broke through clouds, the passengers gasped. Forests stretched wide, rivers sparkled, and mountains rose high against the sky. The air was clean, filling their lungs with a strength they had forgotten. When the doors opened, the first feet touched soil. Children knelt and pressed their hands into the dirt, laughing as they felt the roughness between their fingers. Elders closed their eyes and lifted their faces to the sun, letting its warmth wash over them. People wept openly, but these were not tears of despair. They were tears of life. The humans had prepared tents, food, and water. They had built fires for warmth. There were no weapons pointed, no walls raised. The exiles walked carefully at first, waiting for the trick, but none came. Instead, humans guided them to seats, pressed food into their hands, and asked them simple questions. Were they comfortable? Were they warm? Did they need more? As night fell, the exiles sat together under the stars. For the first time in memory, their children were not hungry. Their elders were not ignored. Their hearts were not crushed by endless rejection. They were not yet citizens, not yet part of this world. But Earth had given them something greater than food and shelter. Earth had given them dignity. And in the quiet of the night, many of them whispered the same words to each other. Perhaps this is home. The exiles found rest on Earth, but rest did not always bring peace. For many, the food tasted too sweet. The beds felt too soft, and the smiles of the humans seemed too easy. Suspicion grew in the shadows of their new camp. Lena sat near a fire with her son. The boy was eating fruit with sticky hands and laughing for the first time in months. She smiled at him, yet her mind stayed restless. She remembered the voices of other worlds, the cold replies of governors who had ordered them away. She remembered the hunger of long years in space. She could not believe kindness could last. Nearby, groups of exiles argued in low voices. Some said the humans were only pretending to care. Others said the humans would soon demand labor or service in exchange for food. A few whispered darker thoughts, that the humans would use them as tools, or worse, throw them back into space when the supplies ran thin. Darren, the elder, moved among them. He listened to their doubts without anger. He understood why they spoke with fear. He too had once believed that no world would ever take them in. Yet he had seen the calm eyes of the human officer and heard the promise in her voice. He believed there was truth in those words. That night, a meeting was held. Leaders of the exile groups gathered in a large tent lit by lanterns. The air was thick with tension. Some wanted to trust the humans, others wanted to prepare to flee if betrayal came. Lena stood and spoke. The humans give food, but food is not free. No one gives without reason. We must find out what they want before we place our children in their care. Her voice trembled with both fear and strength. Many nodded at her words. Another man, Rin, shook his head. We have wandered too long. If we doubt every hand that reaches for us, we will die in doubt. The humans have asked for nothing. They built shelters for us before we even touched their soil. That is not the work of trickery. That is the work of compassion. The voices rose, sharp and divided. Trust clashed with suspicion, hope with fear. Some shouted that they would not be fooled again. Others begged that they give the humans a chance. The argument stretched into the night. Outside the tent, children played with human children. They shared toys, laughed at words they did not fully understand, and chased each other under the stars. They did not question kindness. They accepted it with open hearts. The sound of their laughter reached the elders in the tent, softening the harsh edges of the debate. At last, Darren spoke. His voice was old but carried weight. We have lived in fear too long. Fear kept us alive, but fear also chained us to despair. Look at what the humans have done already. They gave food, they gave water, they gave shelter, and they asked for nothing. If they wished us harm, it would have been simple to let us die in space. Yet here we are, breathing air, eating food, and watching our children laugh. If this is a trap, then it is unlike any I've ever seen. Silence followed his words. The leaders lowered their heads, their hearts heavy with choice. The next day, the humans invited groups of exiles to walk with them through nearby fields. They showed them the crops growing in the soil, the machines that watered and harvested, the schools where children learned. They explained not in grand speeches but in simple acts, how to plant seeds, how to filter water, how to build walls from stone. The exiles watched closely. No soldiers marched behind them. No guards stood with weapons ready. The humans walked as neighbors, not masters. They laughed freely and offered tools without hesitation. Lena walked with her son beside a human farmer. The farmer bent down, picked up a handful of soil, and let it slip through his fingers. Here, he said with a smile, everything begins again. Lena's son copied the gesture, giggling as dirt covered his hands. For the first time, Lena felt her fear bend, though it did not fully break. At night, when the exiles returned to their camp, the doubts still lingered. Yet alongside doubt, there was a seed of trust. They had seen no chains, no hidden threats. They had seen only people willing to share. Around the fires, talk softened. Suspicion had not vanished, but it no longer ruled every voice. For the first time since their arrival, the exiles began to speak not only of survival but of possibility. Darren sat apart from the others, watching the stars. He knew trust would not come easily. Wounds of betrayal did not heal in a day, but he also knew that fear could not guide them forever. If the exiles were to have a future, they would need to take a step forward, even if that step carried risk. And so the question remained in every heart. Were the humans truly as they seemed, or was another betrayal waiting beyond the horizon? The answer was unknown, but for the first time in years, the exiles had the courage to wonder. The days on Earth slowly turned into weeks, and the camp of the exiles changed with time. What had once been rows of tents grew into small houses of wood and stone. Smoke from cooking fires rose into the air, and laughter of children filled the fields. The exiles were still strangers on this world, but life no longer felt like a dream waiting to be broken. The humans did not treat them as guests to be pitied. Instead, they treated them as neighbors. They showed the exiles how to plant crops in rich soil. They handed them tools and stood beside them in the fields. The exiles were not asked to work, but they chose to. Their hands, once weak from hunger, grew strong as they tilled the ground and carried water. Rin, who had once spoken loudly of trust, worked each day with human farmers. At first, his movements were clumsy. The human plows were strange, the soil heavy. But the humans laughed kindly, showing him better ways. Soon Rin's rows grew as straight as theirs, and his pride returned. He began teaching others among the exiles, passing on what he learned. Lena, still cautious, found herself helping in another way. The humans brought books for the children, filled with drawings and simple words. Lena watched as her son sat with human children, tracing letters with his small fingers. She did not know the language well, but the joy in his eyes was enough. Slowly she began to sit with him, repeating the words, learning beside him. Doubt still lingered in her heart, but learning gave her hope. Darren, though old, gave his time to the workshops. The humans showed how to repair machines with spare parts. The exiles had long learned to survive by fixing broken things in space, and Darren's hands remembered the skill. He worked with steady patience, teaching younger exiles how to fit wires and gears. The humans listened with respect, for the exiles knew methods of survival even the humans had not seen. Day by day, a quiet exchange grew. The exiles shared what they knew of water recycling, starship farming, and energy cells. The humans shared the strength of Earth, the richness of its soil, and the simplicity of its tools. Neither side claimed to be greater. Both sides simply learned. One evening, after a long day of work, the humans and exiles gathered together in the open fields. Food was shared from both sides. The humans roasted vegetables, while the exiles brought dishes made from seeds they had carried across the stars. The air was filled with the smell of cooking and the sound of voices mingling. Children danced between the groups, singing songs in mixed tongues. Elders told stories of their long journey, and the humans listened with quiet respect. When the humans spoke of their own history, of how Earth had survived wars and storms, the exiles listened in turn. They saw that Earth had known hardship too, though in different ways. Still, doubt had not vanished. At night, when the fires burned low, Lena spoke softly to Darren. They give us food. They share their land. But I fear one day they will ask us to fight their battles or pay a price we cannot afford. Darren nodded, his face lit by the glow of embers. Perhaps, but life is always risk. We cannot hide forever. What we build with them today will shape what they ask tomorrow. If we stand idle, we will always be at their mercy. If we build together, we may stand beside them. His words stayed with Lena. The next morning, she joined the humans in the fields, her son at her side. She still carried her doubts, but she also carried determination. As the weeks passed, the exiles began to change in the eyes of the humans. They were no longer seen as helpless refugees. They were seen as workers, teachers, and friends. When storm struck, the exiles helped secure houses. When crops failed in one corner of the field, the exiles shared food from their own stores. Trust grew not from words, but from shared struggle. One day, a group of human builders came with plans for a water system. They wanted to bring fresh water to both the camp and the nearby village. The exiles offered to help, using their knowledge of pipes and pumps from the ships. Together they worked for many days, digging trenches, fitting pipes, and testing flow. When at last the water flowed clear and strong, cheers rose from both humans and exiles. That night the camp was filled with celebration. For the first time, the exiles felt not like outsiders living on borrowed land, but like partners shaping a future. As Darren watched the people dance, he thought of the long years in the dark ships of the silence and despair. That world felt far away now. Here on Earth, they had found more than shelter. They had found purpose. And though fear still whispered in some hearts, it no longer held them prisoner. Step by step, they were learning what it meant to live again. The exiles worked side by side with the humans, and life began to feel steady. Each day was filled with small victories. Crops grew taller, houses stood stronger, and children learned to laugh without fear. Yet far beyond Earth, across the dark seas of space, the old empire had not forgotten them. The empire's fleets stretched across many stars, and its rulers watched every whisper of news. When word reached them that the exiles had found shelter on Earth, anger burned in their councils. To them, the exiles were not people. They were refuse cast aside to clear the empire's path. To see them living, to see them working, was an insult. Earth dares to keep what we have thrown away, one ruler said. This cannot be allowed. Scouts were sent. Silent ships crossed the distance and reached the edge of the solar system. They saw the small human fleets patrolling, the stations near the moon and the camps on the planet below. They returned with their report, and the Empire's decision was swift. A fleet of warships was prepared, armed with weapons that had crushed many worlds before. On Earth, the exiles did not yet know. Their days still passed with the rhythm of work and rest. But some felt unease, like a shadow pressing on their hearts. Darren stood one evening on a hill overlooking the camp. The stars above were bright, but he could not shake the feeling that danger was moving among them. His feeling proved true. One morning, human commanders came to the camp with grave faces. They spoke to the leaders of the exiles. Our watchers in the outer system have seen ships. They are not ours. They bear the mark of the Empire. Fear spread through the exiles like fire through dry grass. Memories returned of the day they had been loaded into broken ships, the day they were abandoned in space. The Empire had no mercy for them then, and they expected none now. Lena held her son close, her voice shaking. We must leave. The Empire will destroy us, and the humans too. We cannot let Earth suffer because of us. Others agreed, panic rising. They spoke of fleeing into the wilderness, of hiding in the deep forests of Earth. But the humans did not speak of surrender or retreat. You are not a burden, one officer said firmly. You are part of our world now. If the Empire comes, we will stand against them. The exiles stared in shock. Stand against the Empire? The idea seemed impossible. The Empire's fleets were vast, their weapons powerful. Humanity was strong, yes, but compared to the Empire, they seemed small. Rin spoke what many thought. You cannot fight them. No one can. They will burn your world as they burned ours. The human commander met his gaze. Perhaps they can burn cities. Perhaps they can shatter ships. But they cannot break our will. We have defended our home before. We will do it again. The words carried a steady strength that silenced argument. The exiles had never seen such courage. Worlds under the Empire usually bowed, too afraid to resist. But here stood humans, ready to defy. Days of preparation followed. Human fleets gathered near the moon. Pilots trained, engineers built defenses, and messages were sent across Earth to ready the people. The exiles watched with heavy hearts. Some offered to help, but others feared their hands would bring only more loss. Darren stood before them one night. His voice was soft but carried across the camp. We cannot run again. We cannot hide forever. These people have given us food, water, and dignity. Now they risk their lives for us. We must decide. Will we stay in fear, or will we stand beside them? Silence fell. Slowly hands rose. First Rin, then Lena, then many others. They could not match the power of the Empire, but they could offer knowledge, skills, and courage. When the humans heard, they welcomed the exiles not as guests, but as allies. The exiles taught them how to stretch supplies in battle, how to repair machines quickly, and how to endure long days without rest. The humans shared their strategies and their spirit. In the skies above Earth, ships gathered like storm clouds. The Empire's fleet drew nearer, their engines glowing like cold suns. The day of confrontation was coming. On the ground, children still played, but now their laughter mixed with the distant echo of drills and engines. Parents watched the sky with worry. Yet for the first time, the exiles did not feel helpless. They were afraid, but they were not alone. The shadow had returned darker than ever. But this time the exiles had something worth fighting for. Earth had given them shelter. Now together they would fight to keep it. The day the Empire arrived, Earth's skies were heavy with tension. Dark warships glinted in the sunlight as they approached from the outer system. The humans and exiles gathered on the ground and in the orbiting stations, ready to face the impossible. Rin stood on a hill with other exiles, looking up at the enemy ships. He had never seen machines so large or weapons so deadly. His hands shook, but he drew a deep breath. He remembered Darren's words. They could not run again. They could not hide. The human fleets moved with precise coordination. Pilots in sleek craft took positions around the planet. Satellites hummed with energy, creating shields and defenses. Humans were ready, but they were fewer in number. Their technology smaller compared to the Empire's massive ships. Still, they had something the Empire could not measure: determination. Darren spoke quietly to the exiles beside him. We have skills they do not expect. We know survival, repair, and endurance. We can make a difference. Lena looked at her son, his small hand in hers. Fear tried to squeeze her heart, but she nodded. We will do what we can. For him, for all of us. When the Empire's first attack came, the skies erupted in light. Energy beams streaked toward Earth's orbiting stations, shaking the defenses. Human pilots darted among the warships, evading fire and striking where they could. The exiles worked tirelessly on the ground, repairing broken circuits, refueling craft, and helping direct supplies. Rin and a group of young exiles climbed into a small shuttle. Their task was not to fight directly, but to carry engineers and materials to ships damaged in battle. The engines sputtered, but they moved with careful determination. Each repair, each small success, kept the human fleet alive. On the fields below, Lena and others helped operate communications and monitor sensors. They guided pilots around debris, warned of approaching ships, and kept the flow of information steady. Every warning they gave saved lives. Every small decision mattered. Hours passed. The battle raged in the skies above, but the exiles and humans on Earth stood strong. The Empire expected fear, expected submission. Instead, they found unity and courage. Children watched from safe zones, learning what it meant to defend a home. The exiles could see the difference their presence made. They were not merely passengers in this world. They were part of its defense. Darren directed teams moving between damaged stations. Sparks flew from broken wires, alarms screamed, but he remained calm. His experience in space, surviving years on failing ships, made him a guide through chaos. Young exiles followed his instructions without hesitation, trusting in a man who had once been abandoned just like them. Lena's son watched the sky as human pilots maneuvered with skill. He asked questions and she answered as best she could. She realized that even in fear there was teaching. Even in danger there was growth. The Empire's presence had brought them together not only in survival but in purpose. As the day turned to night, the Empire's ships began to retreat. They had not expected resistance so fierce, so coordinated, and they underestimated the bond between humans and exiles. Every strike they had made was met with repair, every advance countered by skill and courage. Earth had not fallen. Cheers rose from the fields and stations. Humans hugged exiles. Children ran freely, laughing despite the smoke in the distance. Darren stood with Lena and Rin, watching the dark ships disappear into space. They were not safe yet, but they had proven something important. Fear could not dominate when people stood together. Rin exhaled deeply. I did not think we could fight them, he said. But we did, and not alone. We did it together. Lena smiled, her son clinging to her leg. We are stronger than I imagined. Perhaps we always were. We just needed a home to show it, Darren nodded. This battle is only one moment. The Empire may return. But today we learned that unity matters more than fear. We learned that Earth is more than land and water. Earth is courage. Earth is hope. That night fires burned across the fields. Humans and exiles sat side by side, sharing food and stories. The children, tired but happy, slept in safe shelters. Every adult felt the weight of what had happened, and every heart carried a quiet pride. The Empire had returned to the void beyond the stars, but they had left something behind too. proof that Earth's people, and the exiles who had joined them, could stand against even the greatest power. In that moment, under the calm night sky, Darren whispered to himself, "We were cast aside. We were abandoned. But together we can rise." And for the first time in many years, the exiles truly believed it. The battle had ended and Earth breathed in quiet relief. Smoke still drifted from repaired fields, and the distant hum of ships in orbit reminded everyone of the narrow escape. The exiles walked among the humans, their steps no longer heavy with fear but steady with purpose. Darren stood on a hill overlooking the settlement. The tents and small houses glowed softly in the evening light. Children ran freely across the fields, chasing each other and laughing without worry. Birds circled above, and the wind carried the scent of fresh soil and growing crops. For the first time in years, Darren allowed himself to imagine a future. The humans had kept their promise. They had not turned the exiles away, nor had they demanded anything unreasonable. They had built hospitals for the sick, schools for the children, and shelters for the weary. They had shown that strength is not measured only by weapons, but by willingness to protect and nurture others. Rin walked beside Darren, his eyes scanning the horizon. "We survived the Empire. We did not run. We did not hide. We stood, and Earth stood with us. I never thought we could feel this safe." Darren smiled faintly. "Safety is more than walls and shields. Safety is trust, and we have learned to trust again." Lena knelt beside a small garden, her hands in the rich soil. Her son dug beside her, laughing as he buried his small hands in mud. She had watched him grow not just in body but in spirit. The boy was learning not to fear the world, not to expect betrayal at every turn. Lena realized that the child was not the only one being healed. She too was learning that hope could exist beyond sorrow. Over the next days, the exiles began to plant roots in the land itself. They built homes, repaired machines, and shared their knowledge of survival. Humans listened and learned too. Together, they created irrigation systems, repaired old roads, and even built a small school where exiles and human children could learn side by side. The exiles taught techniques for conserving water and energy from their starships. Humans showed them how to grow food faster, how to build simple tools from stone and metal. Even the elders found purpose. Darren helped organize teams to maintain the defenses in orbit. His experience with failing starships made him invaluable in keeping Earth's satellites and communication systems working. Others taught children songs and stories from the stars, keeping the memory of their long journey alive while weaving it into Earth's culture. One morning, Lena stood by the river with Rin. The water sparkled in the sunlight, clear and cold. "We have lived so long in fear," she said, "and now this is ours. We can finally breathe without looking over our shoulders." Rin nodded. "Yes, and we must protect it not just for ourselves but for those who come after. The Empire may return one day, but today we know we are stronger than they believe." Children ran past them, their laughter ringing through the air. Humans and exiles together played simple games, shared meals, and learned each other's ways. The camp had transformed into a village, and the village was becoming a home. In the evenings, the people gathered by fires and shared stories of what had been and what could be. They spoke of the journey through the void, of the kindness of humans who had welcomed them, of the battle fought and survived. Each story carried a lesson, a memory, and a promise. One night, Darren walked through the settlement. He stopped at a small house where Lena's family lived. The boy waved at him, showing a small plant he had grown from a seed. Darren knelt, touched the leaves, and smiled. "You are helping build the future," he said softly. Lena watched from the doorway. "We all are," she replied. "Together we belong here." For the first time, the exiles felt it fully. They were not outsiders. They were not castaways drifting through the stars. They were part of Earth, part of its people, part of its hope. The wounds of the past were not gone, but they were no longer chains. They had found something stronger: community, purpose, and the chance to live again. As the sun set over the horizon, humans and exiles stood together on the hill. Light glimmered across the rivers and fields, painting the world with gold and green. The stars above began to shine, silent witnesses to the journey that had brought the exiles home. Darren raised his hand to the sky. "We were cast aside," he said, his voice steady, "but Earth gave us shelter. Here we are not forgotten. Here we are alive. Here we have hope." All around him, people nodded, their faces bright with the understanding of survival, trust, and belonging. They had been abandoned once, but no longer. Earth had given them a home, and in that home, they would build a future together, stronger and brighter than any star they had once chased. And under the calm night sky, the exiles whispered the same truth to each other. Together they were not lost. Together they were home,